Wine is cultural. Wine is art. There's such a human side to making wine. It's not just a beverage. It's being farmed, it's the soil, it's the weather, it's the terroir, the heart of the winemaker. That's what goes into every glass. I've lived and worked all over the world. In 2012, we opened Magnussen and Mogor in Valle de Guadalupe on the grounds of an organic farm and vineyard with the goal to be as close to a sustainable 0-kilometer restaurant as possible. And I think I finally found my home. I came here because of the incredible ingredients that come from both the Sea of Cortez and the Pacific Ocean. We have beautiful produce, cheeses, meats, olive oils, all within mere miles from the restaurant. For me, it really is a chef's paradise. After I became a Mexican citizen, it was important for me to travel the country and meet like-minded chefs, ranchers, producers, fishermen, artisans, who shared my commitment to responsible and sustainable farming and fishing. Join me as we explore and deep dive into the magical landscape of Mexico and discover its rich culinary tapestry. For a country not known for its wine, Mexico is making a name for itself and getting noticed by wine aficionados. It's a region where there are no rules that winemakers must follow, where the vineyards grow a blend of varietals from the world over.
The fact that there's no rules and there's no legislation for the moment, and we're discovering different varietals, the region, the potential, just a new history being formed. This is not happening anywhere else in the world. This is very special because of the moment. The momentum is now.
There's a great deal of creative activity in this part of the world. In many ways, there isn't much history here to hold us back or to guide us, which is why things can develop in an unusual way.
We're not a DOC yet. So here you can grow any grape you like. Here we are free, and this is so typical of Mexico.
In the mid-1980s, a group of forward-thinking pioneers began to change the trajectory of Mexican wine and began producing high-quality boutique varietals.
Mexico changed dramatically after the decade of the 1980s, and it definitely had different people being part of that movement. It was a team effort, and it was a Mexican wine, and it was quality that really lifted up and is responsible for this big boom that we have today.
As the wine industry flourishes, world-class chefs are coming to the valley, pioneering Baja cuisine and embracing gastronomy at its roots. Valle de Guadalupe in Baja California is one of the most exciting wine and gastronomy regions in the world.
Well, wine and gastronomy go together, absolutely. You cannot think about in one without relating it to the others. You cannot drink a glass of wine just like that. You need something nice to eat with it, and you cannot eat a nice plate without a glass of wine.
People don't expect anything from Mexican wine because probably 80%, 90% of people never have tried a Mexican wine. So It's surprising for everyone. You know that Chardonnay has to be like this, right? But how about a Mexican Chardonnay or a Tempranillo Sauvignon blend? So I think Mexico or Baja is cool because of that, because you don't expect anything out of it, so it just blows your mind instantly.
It's one of the nice things about being here in Baja California that you can really kind of do sort of whatever you want.
Exactly.
Because of the quality of the grapes, because of the climate that we have, as the years progressed, there became sentiment within the few people that were here in the valley making wine that this could actually be a place that could be a very well-known and very quality-oriented wine region. And that was led largely by Hugo D'Acosta and Hans Backhoff of Montéchenique.
Really, when you think about Hugo D'Acosta and what his sort of legacy is on the valley, essentially he was the first person that started to convince grape growers to make wine. Basically what had happened was there were three big buyers. This is late 80s. And those three big buyers had gotten to a point where they so controlled the market. It was really oppression on these farmers. And it was more expensive for the farmers to raise the grapes and pick them and bring them to the buyer than it was for them just to leave it. The price had become so low and the farmers were so sort of pushed down that there was no incentive to continue growing good fruit. And Hugo said, well, I'll buy your fruit. You know, well, why don't I make some wine? Why don't you make some wine? You're growing this great fruit. Why don't you start a winery? Why don't you make wine from your own grapes? We don't have to sell it. And really convincing farmers to take that step up and now become winemakers. I think that's Hugo D'Acosta's legacy. I think becoming the catalyst, the fire starter for grape growers to become winemakers.
At that moment, we needed to develop a strong culture in terms of winemaking, but the land, the plants, the vineyard was here. So the only thing that we needed was working as a people to develop a Mexican personality. If we help people to make better wine, the region is going to have better quality and better reputation. If we are able to pass something good, something strong to the new generation. And that is probably the most important work, the most important subject that we need to take care of. Well, this is a momentum. Now we are a lot of people with different ideas, with different wine schools, trying to show what is possible to do here, which will be the best grape or the best wine to make here. The Valley said, well, I give you the best weather condition as possible, and you could experiment as much as you want.
And that's something I really, really enjoyed about spending time with Hugo and understanding his wines. He's been somebody that's facilitated the ability to learn, giving people a platform to learn about wine with the Escuelita. That philosophy and that point of view of opening up and sharing, as opposed to, I'm really good at this, I don't want anybody to see over my shoulder what I'm doing, is such a progressive mindset. And understanding that if he wants the destination to excel and succeed and reach its full potential, he can't do it by himself. He needs to give other people the tools, and that's what's created these very curvy, beautiful avenues of wine in the valley, where it's just a unbelievably sincere and true expression of wine creativity that I'm not sure is happening anywhere else in the world right now.
or the south, well, or to the north, but any other part of Mexico apart from here, the traditions are very deep. The culture is obvious, hundreds and thousands of years of history behind it. The people who've arrived more recently don't have ties to the past so much. Or if they do, they're ties from where they came from, but they arrive here and realize that they can start again. So we can do whatever we want, and there's nothing to hold us back.
So the rule is there are no rules, except that we tend to want to use local ingredients, to have a philosophy about food, which mirrors the philosophy about wine, is that things be as natural as possible, as local as possible, and as sustainable as possible. And so we've created a whole new kind of Mexican gastronomy, which is Baja cuisine, which never existed anywhere. And because there were no rules here, because there was nothing here, people have been able to actually create something that's now really in the vanguard all over Mexico.
This is the prologue of the book of Valle de Guadalupe, and we are ending it. The first chapter, I think, is the second generation. When you go to Tuscany, when you go even to Napa, especially Napa, they have at least 40 years with the certainty that Cabernet Sauvignon, it's the grape, and that they have to construct everything around that varietal. The commercial aspect, the agricultural aspect, the aspect of the winemaking, and us as a first generation, we can get away with it. Since we are first generation, we have the opportunity, and we have also the freedom to explore. For example, here we have one Spanish varietal and the rest are French varietals, all of them from the Mediterranean. But you just travel 1 kilometer or half a mile, and you go to a winery that only has Italian. And then you travel maybe 2 kilometers or 4 kilometers, and you have a crazy guy that has Malbec or Pinot Noir. So that, again, I think the diversity translates to everything that we do here.
Natalia Badan is the matriarch of the valley. She was raised here. Her family's owned this land since the early 50s. Her family was key in the initial development of the valley. Her father planted olivares, the carob trade, and has been an extreme force in conservation efforts. She's an activist. She's key to the past and the future for Guadalupe Valley. I think it's tough in a very small area like Guadalupe Valley to really define one varietal or a couple of varietals that define the valley, just because it's so varied. From the upper part of the valley is a totally different climate than San Antonio Las Minas. And then because there's so many different people from so many different places, I think with this wine, you've defined the valley, but the valley through the eyes of Familia Badan.
Yes, sure.
Right? So this is your heritage, and you've treated French grapes in a way that has become Mexican wine. You're not attempting to make a Bordeaux replica, but you're respecting your heritage in the terroir, the terruño, the context of your ranch.
Yes, but I think we're still very young. You know, this boom began about 30 years. So that makes us very, very young. And I think we'll have to adapt to climate change. We'll eventually have to look for other varietals. And with the time, I think we'll find some varieties that express. You cannot force it, you know. You really have to adopt like the rhythm of nature. And every time you make a wine, it takes you 1 year, like, to begin to know what is going to happen with it. So that makes many, many years. I think.
Well, Nebbiolo does very well, right?
Well, yeah.
Tempranillo does very well. Anything that, that absorbs the heat and takes the dryness and lack of water.
And we're having trouble with Cabernet Franc, for example, now, which I like very much. But we're still experimenting a lot, and we're making very good wines. I think every year they're better because people are much more knowledgeable.
That's a hard one. That's not an easy one to say. That's a tough one for me to.
So the fascinating thing about it is that you're always learning.
All the time.
And through this knowing and learning every year, we can discover things.
Definitely.
There's no one style. And we, again, coming back to history, we all have a history. And Hugo had his personal history, in Montpellier and where he lived. And starting here, I was in Bordeaux, Victor Torsaler was in Bordeaux. There's people that, young winemakers that come from Australia now that are Mexican but studied in Australia, or that are Mexican but studied in Spain. And that just means that today we have a lot of different styles, a lot of diversity. When you taste something like this, this is a Cab Franc and Petit Syrah blend. Who would think of blending Petit Syrah and Cab Franc, right? It doesn't make sense at all. Who has Petit Syrah apart from California, and us? Not even in France. It's a varietal that's kind of disappearing. So it's cool to find it again in Mexico. All of these things just make it so exciting and fun. And people that are very, I studied in Bordeaux, so very snobbish and classical in their wine drinking, when they see this, it's like, wow, how can they not fall in love? Because they want that, step out of the golden cage and do different stuff. And that's exactly what's happening. I have one that's called El Bastardo. That's Montepulciano in Mourvedre. Nobody would think, Italians and French would kill us, and they would kill each other and they would kill us afterwards. But it's amazing and it's great. It makes us advance so much quicker. We are very young. There's been winemaking in Mexico and Baja for ages, centuries, literally. As an industry, we're very young. I could think of Montechanic in the 1980s that really started pushing us as an industry. So we're in the second generation of winemakers, and we're advancing and doing co-fermentations and natural wines and co-planting and orange wines and things that a lot of people wouldn't dare to dream elsewhere because they can't, because of an appellation. And this just makes us learn so much quicker.
As you travel around the world, so many wine growing places have an appellation. If it's from Macon, it's got to be, if it says Macon, it's got to be Chardonnay, right? If it's from Sancerre, it's got to be Sauvignon Blanc. And if it's not, it has to say what the varietal is, right? We don't have an appellation yet. I think it's coming. I think that eventually we'll have something that identifies maybe almost like the German way of identifying favorable growing regions as opposed to saying what grape has to be from a certain place. How do you define Baja wines?
I think that what makes it more attractive, what makes it exciting and vibrant is this freedom that we have. Most of us didn't have a grandparent that taught us how to make wine, or even a parent.
Right.
Like we're first generation.
Yeah. And which is really different. You think about Europe or other wine, it's like
you inherit a
15th generation, or
yes.
What is the Rothschild things like? How do you continue to make such good wine? Well, you do it for 100 years and figure out all the errors, and then you just repeat that for the next 200. You're like, oh, okay, well, that sounds easy.
Well, it's very exciting to be part of history, of the discovery of what is Mexican wine.
Lo padre de aquí, siento yo, de Baja, es la como diversidad que tienes tú, claro, de variedades. Tienes Grenache, Carignan, hablamos de Chenin Blanc, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Viognier, no sé, un montón de variedades que lo hace único también y que se dan por el tipo de clima que tenemos también. Entonces,
es interesante porque también aquí hay varios microclimas,
exacto,
pero la goma que está allá,
exacto,
todo este lado tiene un efecto marino.
Exacto, tienes el Valle de San Vicente, aquí es Valle de Guadalupe, tienes San Antonio, entonces son diferentes.
Nos pasa aquí, tu casa es 1 kilómetro para allá, y nos pasa que hay lluvia
sí, claro,
en la casa, y aquí en Mogor es sol.
Otro clima.
Es otra
muy
cosa
diferente.
totalmente.
Y eso hace que, volvemos a lo mismo de la identidad del vino, ¿no? De Baja,
When it's something you and I've talked about a lot is what is that magic point when you decide to harvest? Because that makes a huge difference. And you can't just go, okay, well, it has this number of bricks, time to harvest. Because it's not just the sugar, it's so much more.
Yes.
And just playing that sort of moving scale of, well, what do I want the wine to be at the end?
Right.
How complex is this for a rosé, or is it for, I mean, there's just so many options, but just that. And it's probably, I'm guessing it's probably for you guys, it's the biggest pressure point of the year. Once the fruit's in your winery, I'm guessing you sort of got it more or less under control.
These gray hairs are precisely that. Choosing the best day to pick, because there's only one. There's one best day.
Yeah, you can't staple them back on them.
Yeah, it's the one thing is your sugar, which is your alcohol content, and your acidity. But what's more important in the wine is the flavors you get out of it. So the last analysis you do is walking the vineyards, trying the fruit, because there isn't an instrument but yourself for the flavors. You can have a lab analysis for flavors.
That's a good point.
And the day of harvest is taking the picture, and you have a composition, you have your lighting, that can't change. There's no going back.
So this is Tempranillo here?
Tempranillo to the left, Nebbiolo to the right.
This is Nebbiolo.
Yeah.
Because they're gorgeous clusters.
Aren't they pretty? So that's why when we do our testing for the bricks, is we want to do both sides, high,
sure.
low, because oftentimes when people just pull a cluster, it's not a true representative of where we're at.
Right, because morning fruit, morning sun, afternoon sun.
Well, and you saw the end caps of the Tempranillo, and then look at what we have here.
Yeah, you scatter all over the place, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, this will never come to fruition, so we're gonna have to go through and drop it.
Can we do that right now?
Yeah, please.
One of the parts about being a winemaker, once it's in the winery to a certain extent, you sort of have control. You can control temperature, you can control volume of the vessel, you can control how much air it gets, you control a lot of things.
Okay.
But when the grape's still hanging on the plant, your decision when to pick, it's a one-shot thing. I mean, obviously you can do separate cuts.
Right.
You can do more cuts on the same rows. You can do...
Well, that's why you also know a true winemaker during harvest, the dirt on their boots. I walk the lines multiple times a day because as a chef, you get it. In the morning, that fruit hanging has a different impact than at the end of the day if it was a really hot day. Or, you know, if you see something is evolving and you can hit it with a bunch of water and hope to plump it up to give it a little more longevity. It is a dance, and hoping not to step on each other's toes and trying to figure out the best time. But once you cut it off the plant, you can't put it back on.
Right, it's done.
Then you have to, your parameters are set. Your acid is what it is, your sugars are what it is, and then therefore, that's when you have to maybe become a little more creative with your fermentations by working with temperature, working with yeast. But I mean, I guess, just like raising children, you can't just set it and forget it. Put it into a calculator and have this awesome result. I mean, you have to be just as interactive with the growing process as you do within the fermentation, as you do within the aging. And so there has to be a great amount of respect to the process and the field. And I also think that, you know, they respond well to if you walk through and you love on them a little bit. When I'm harvesting, I'm always playing music and, you know, just...
You're one of those.
I am.
Yeah.
But I do it by myself.
Sure.
I do.
Yeah,
I wake up at like 4 o'clock in the morning with my headlamp.
Oh, man. I don't know how many times and how many hours and days and sunsets.
And sunrises.
Sometimes sunrises. I sat here with your dad.
You know, the first few years, I think, was really special. I think, you know, having my dad here who created this sort of relationship with the community, I think, you know, that's something that you also helped teach me. I remember my third month here, I was just so privileged, and we were at our lunch at Laja. These people cannot respect my time, and I was on one, and you just let me go, and then you said to me, you said, okay, cool, Chris, well, you have two options. You can walk around with this heavy backpack and you could just be angry at everyone, or you could realize that these people are inviting you into their community and it's their culture. So how about you change your priorities and your expectations around to fall in line more with what's going on here? And that kind of kicked the pedestal out from underneath me, and I was like, there's a reason this gringo is existing down here in goodness. And then between you and Dad, I mean, my first 4 years here was fun, full of good times.
It's still fun.
It is.
I miss your dad. I miss your dad every day.
My dad always found the excuse to show up at your restaurant, and you also were a horrible influence. It would be 6:30 in the evening.
We were mutually horrible.
All the reservations are in. The grill's still hot. You want to come over? My dad's like, well, we can't let that grill go to waste.
He's burning firewood. Somebody's got to eat something.
Yeah, but I think that what I love about the two of you guys together was not only did you have an adventurous spirit, but also your high respect for the idea of coming in as an immigrant, if you will. You know, it's coming in and embracing the culture and adapting, and you know, I think that's also what we do as chefs and winemakers alike. The idea of coming in and respectfully taking the ingredient or the space or the community for all of the beauty, and not trying to change it in a personal way, but trying to leave a positive impact. So when you are gone, you know, people think fondly of your experience. And you know, that was something my dad did well.
I mean, I've seen changes in you. I've seen changes in Lechuza. I mean, where do you think this is going? I mean, it's obvious that we have some issues, some growing pains right now in the valley. Where's this headed?
The water thing is beyond. We don't have nearly as much watering because all of these new vineyards are sucking up all of the superficial top watering. Not only that, the tourism is different. 10 years ago when we opened, we would blow up balloons and stand on the side of the highway and wave people down, hoping that they would join our family table's barbecue, you know? And now we have to turn people away because we can't fit it. Where is it gonna be in 10 years? Man, I hope it slows down, and I hope that we can invest in proper infrastructure to keep our existing community safe. The folks who work every single day in these vineyards and have for generations should have running water in their house, rather than a 4-diamond resort with a, you know, massive bathtub. You know, there has to be some sort of balance.
Now here's to Lechuza.
Cheers. Thank you.
Here's to Ray.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
When we think of winemaking, we think of a winery, but actually it's agriculture. It's down in the vineyard. So my most important job is being in the vineyard. I'm over there 3 times a week, tasting grapes, and you have to have a balance between acidity and sugar. And that depends on your palate, right? Like Kristin, who I love, can choose to harvest a certain date because she likes, it's like a chef, no? She likes her Chardonnay a certain way. I like my Chardonnay another way. I always talk with examples, and I like this example because it talks to you. Like tomatoes. If you want to do a carpaccio tomato, you have to choose a certain type of tomato. If you wait too long with an overripe tomato and you cut it, it'll be impossible. That tomato is great for sauce, but not for a carpaccio. You have to think of a grape the same way. If I want a crisp, bright, non-malolactic, non-oaky Chardonnay, then I'm gonna harvest it early because I need that freshness, that sharpness, that crispness. So it's all about just being in the vineyard, tasting the grapes. I hate numbers. I hate having bricks or, it's all about senses. So I'm always tasting the grape just to see when I have the perfect balance between that nice acidity, brightness, and sugar, density, creaminess, and then I choose when to harvest, and we have to do it immediately. Cooking and making wine is very personal and very intimate, no? So I had built my life in Bordeaux and I wanted to stay there. But when I saw Eileen and Phil Gregory, who I love, they came to Bordeaux and they presented their wines and they started to talk about the Valle. And I'm like, oh my God, they're American and British. They seem so in love with the region. I want that. I want to be in love. I was in love with what I was doing, but not maybe with the region as much. And listening to them and seeing their eyes light up, I want that. So I came back to Ensenada and started tasting, and God, it was amazing. And I think that's the difference. When you go to Vinacava and you have Phil's wine, it's Phil. It's him, first person being involved and personally and directly being involved in it. So I think that made the difference, and that's when I chose to come back home. And it's cool, and I think, Baja is amazing. You actually get to see the people who are behind each project. We need to taste every week, and then we adapt whatever we're doing. So that's the fun part of it. It's always wine is living, so we always adapt to what we're tasting. Tasting is a very, very important part of what we do. And I think, again, coming back to Baja, we still do it, because we don't have to do a certain type of product. We can do whatever nature gave us that year and adapt to the terroir, adapt to the grapes without having to do a protocol or a certain type of product. This can change every year and nobody would hate us because of it. So it's much more authentic, no?
I think in the younger generation, and even so much more on the younger ones, we are now very much connected into the problematics we're going to have in terms of climate, drought. So staying separated from agriculture, I think, is no longer possible. Not just for me that I work directly in agriculture. I think as a generation, we're so much more connected to where did this come from? What is it doing to the planet that I live in? Is it helping? Is it part of the problem? You start to be a bit more conscious, and maybe our parents didn't have that connection to land as deeply as we have to. Natural wine is initially connected very much to what happens in the field, in the vineyard, in the agriculture. So you can't really create a good natural wine or have a good conversation with your wine and with your grape and with your region if it's so much more controlled by many factors. So initially, I like that it's very honest and very sensible in the way you approach it. So for me, it was to really understand the region and to understand the personality that we're capable of communicating and expressing.
This first one's Bonita. It's really nice.
Thank you.
And so this is your wine, right, Tito?
Yeah, this is a blend of Chardonnay with Chenin Blanc. The idea is a wine that pairs well with all the ingredients from the ocean.
So this is Fluxus.
That's Fluxus, yeah.
So we met, probably 2008 or 9. At that time, it was still pretty small. I mean, there was only 25 or 30 wineries.
Yeah.
And now, how many are there?
Closer to 200.
Closer to 200.
Not all of them have wineries but they have a wine project.
Okay. This place has changed a lot.
It's changed a lot, but for me, Baja is amazing.
What changes have you seen?
In terms of the quality for me. For me, when exactly.
The 10 years that I've been standing here, I've seen 10
different,
very, very different seasons and very different results at the end of the year when you're harvesting the grapes.
Yep.
So as we get more time on the vineyards, we're getting more complex fruit, which is also allowing you guys to produce better wines.
That and the know-how, the years of experience, getting to understand our site, its limitations, which is scarce water, that makes you understand that your only growth is making the best and the most out of what you have.
We're already at a point where water is in everybody's mouth. It's a big deal. I mean, we've reduced the size of our gardens because of lack of water. We've, a lot of things aren't producing because of lack of water. What's our future? Where are we going? Where do we find that stop so the wine culture can continue and not the antro culture or the cantina culture that's going to end up taking all the water that we need for the grapes?
Well, that's a $1 million question, Drew.
But you guys are young and smart.
Sigue el tema de que crece el valle en desigualdad. O sea, no hay un ordenamiento. A pesar de lo que vemos, el producto, si no logramos realmente cómo manejar esa parte, a lo mejor en el futuro pues se va a perder. Algo que es tan hermoso como esta parte, tan auténtico, que al final los que han venido de atrás, Natalia, Hugo, y muchos enólogos que ya pues tienen una trayectoria y que pues se empezó este movimiento, de una u otra forma te toca la batuta, ¿no? Ahora tú tienes que defenderlo.
¿Qué crees es algo que necesitamos hacer?
Que la misma gente local, o el Estado, vemos, ¿no? Deben tener una visión mucho más también, mucho más amplia también.
De largo plazo. Y no a ganar hoy.
Y no a ganar hoy.
Yeah.
Exacto. Creo que siendo una de las zonas más importantes de vino, sí, nosotros le damos la importancia, pero también necesitamos que otra gente también le dé la importancia, lo que somos.
Alberto, where are we going, man?
Ideally, it would be to translate, to communicate to the new players that are making projects today. They didn't live the initial days, the glorious days when this started. So we have to communicate and this emotion. But the important thing is not to forget what gave identity to the site, what gave it a healthy growth. It was all this camaraderie.
Well, I really respect both of you guys, and I really enjoy all the wines that both of you make.
Thanks, Drew.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Probablemente debería ser una gran herramienta de un país como México que quiere ser turístico, ¿no? Y podemos incluir al Valle de Guadalupe ya en un gran modelo como Tulum o con todos estos lugares. Se vuelven muy poderosos porque tienen mucho que ofrecer, pero al final son serviles y al final cambian la esencia de las personas que viven ahí. Y eso no debe pasar. O sea, este país tiene que entender que probablemente una de las industrias más contaminantes, si no se ataca bien, es el turismo, porque ataca el pensamiento. Y nosotros debemos de ser grandes anfitriones, grandes prestadores de servicios como son. O sea, yo creo que lo que tenemos claro es que la gente que se dedica a esto, pues tú que tienes tanta gente trabajando contigo, sabes lo que ponen para que la gente se sienta bien. Pero el chiste es que el mensaje sea el adecuado.
Tienes el mejor ejemplo de alguien que prácticamente nació en el Valle y que lleva 60 y tantos años aquí, Natalia Badan, que es, o sea, la socia casera con quien Drew convive todos los días. Ahí está toda su esencia, con sus vinos, con su jardín, y gran parte de la congruencia y de la fuerza de Degmans tiene que ver
pues
justamente...
Es un contrapeso, ¿no? Es un contrapeso.
Tiene que ver con esa raíz, pero creo que se va dando una nueva sensibilidad.
No. Yo creo que aquí estamos súper confundidos. O sea, tenemos un valle, dicho por muchas personas, en muchas épocas, habla de una vocación. Esta discusión y subrayar la frase, la hemos dicho muchas veces, así como hemos dicho ingrediente, 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 hemos dicho vocación. Vocación es un lugar que tiene una magia única independientemente de sus habitantes. Nosotros somos los principales culpables de esta destrucción de la cual nos quejamos. Entonces, ¿qué hacemos? Yo estoy dispuesto a dejar la uva y pregonar que este es un valle con una vocación y que debe haber viñedos y volverme a cultivos mixtos, aunque produzca una centésima parte de la uva que hago. Lo que pasa es que hay que bajar la escalera o subir la escalera en escalones. Pero la realidad es que todo esto es insostenible si no cambiamos la manera de entender lo que tenemos a nuestro alrededor. Entonces tiene que ver con volumen, con consumo, con la manera de disfrutar, con la velocidad, o sea, lo que nos falta es precisión.
Totalmente.
O sea, lo que tenemos que estar cultivando es la sofisticación de la precisión y no la masificación de una región.
As the growth has increased here in the valley, we're seeing non-passion-based investors coming in. And these non-passion-based investors are building big wineries with the idea of selling real estate, with the idea of receiving tour buses, and have really become hostile buyers in the grape market. And they've come in and they've gone to these growers that, I know Natalia's had to 20-year relationships with these growers, and all of a sudden, oh no, our fruit's not available. Well, why is that? Oh, well, because, this new winery here came in and it paid us 3 times what the going rate is, but to sign the contract and to get prepaid, we had to agree not to sell to anybody else but them, and they buy the entire parcel. So very hostile, very, talk to the hand kind of mentality. People who come to a new place and then are not good neighbors are not, improving the overall spirit or soul of the valley. And you're taking people that live, small wine producers that live from what they're doing and now can't get fruit because, you could look at it as, okay, it's capitalism, right? It's supply demand. Well, the supply just went up to, $4,000 a metric ton. If you can't pay it, then it's a natural market cleanser. Straight John Maynard Keynes economy philosophy. But then, there's such a human side to making wine and a cultural side that I think supersedes the business side of it. And, wine is art. Can be art. Wine is cultural. It's not just a beverage. It's being farmed. It's the soil. It's the weather. Everything goes into that glass.
The main thing is not to forget the vocation of the region. And the vocation is agriculture and growing grapes and growing olives and growing Mediterranean cultivars. And it is the only spot in all Mexico where we can do that. So I think that we really have to defend that vocation for the future, because if we lose it, if we become a city, we won't get it back.
If we don't conserve what created the tourism then disappears and we're left with nothing, not the tourism or the agriculture, which is then gone because somebody felt like it was more important to have a hotel. I always like to say, if 50 chefs decided to show up in some valley and open 50 restaurants in the middle of where there's nobody, it probably wouldn't do anything or bring anybody. Unfortunately, some of our neighbors and some of our colleagues forget that the wine was here first, and the wine is what allows us to do what we do.
Absolutely, because we want it to last.